I started off dabbling in art from very young.
Grew up watching my dad painting on evenings.
Always drawing, painting, daydreaming, observing stuff.
From the time I was a small child, I loved to draw.
From the time I was, I would say maybe 15, 16, I started to observe a bit more of the wildlife around my house, where I grew up at Latok. And I always used to be drawing and sketching from the time I was in infant school, primary school, all through St. Mary's College.
I grew up watching my dad painting on evenings. And the smell of paint did something to me, and the color of the paints moved something in me, although my mom and dad never wanted us to paint.
I was always interested in recreating anything that fascinates me. So it wasn't just restricted to art, it was just anything in general. I wanted to know the science behind everything. So, since artwork normally fascinates you, I just wanted to know, how do I recreate that?
I've been living here in Labrie for just about 25 years now. From the time I was a small child, I loved to draw. And my parents encouraged me. My father was an elementary school principal, but he liked to draw. He had a little talent, not a lot, but he appreciated it.
As I went into school, preschool and secondary school, my drawing continued. I was a very good illustrator, and I love comics. I grew up on the Marvel comics.
Just been doing this from since I was year-high, since I was a kid. I've always been quiet, introverted, country boy, always drawing, painting, daydreaming, observing stuff. So people around me just kept encouraging me, giving you pencils, drawing books, painting sets.
Well, first off, started off at Ave Maria and then went to Cassius Comprehensive. And soon after there, I met up with the inner gallery.
When I was in my later teenage years, I really took an interest in wildlife.
And my first job was actually a piece-up artist at The Voice. So I started doing comics for The Voice, weekend comics for the Voice newspaper. I was still at secondary school, working part-time. And then from there, I went to Winban and started illustrating, doing illustrations for banana industry. What I used to do was transfer the scientific information into pictorial form for what was then thought were the illiterate, semi-literate farmers of the Windward Islands. So I transferred scientific information into pictorial form. And so I had to learn a new field, visual literacy.
My formal art education began at SMC at the age of, I guess, about 12.
I never really took to formal art training very much. I think when I was about 5 or probably 6, my parents, they saw that I had talent, so they signed me up for a class. And all the other students were older. And they were doing these things, they were talking about the color wheel and all these things. I had no idea what was going on. I was in tears. I wasn't having fun. I didn't get it. So no more art classes for me.
Simple art books, like whatever. I mean, I'm not the oldest, I just study free. So back then we weren't, all the technology and all of what it is now wasn't what it was back then. So any type of reading material, I would have grabbed hands on it. Experiment with different mediums.
We learn in different ways, but we learn from what's around us. We look at the paintings that we respond to, we study them, we try to figure out, okay, what did the artist do here? How was this done? And we look at books, and there's so much that can be learned in that way without formal classes.
I did an art degree at the university, Alwyn St University in Louisiana. But before that, I went to teachers college, so I'm a certified teacher. And even before I started my art degree, I was an engineering major doing architectural drafting and design. So I did a lot of drafting, a lot of drawing before I actually started the art program.
As you know, in St. Mary's, we do have the option of doing arts. So I took art as a subject and even wrote it for CXC. But we did, from the time I was in Form 1, we had Luigi St. Omer, who was our art tutor, and he tutored us through our duration in St. Mary's College.
Most of what I learned, I can attribute it to what he taught me, the principles that he taught me. And well, he is the son of Dunstan St. Omer, the late great Dunstan St. Omer. And at that time, that is the most famous artist in our time at that time.
He was really an inspiration in terms of focusing the talent, I guess, showing us different techniques of sketching, drawing, shading, painting, becoming familiar with use of paints and all that. So that additional training was, I think, what pushed me past the threshold of saying, okay, this is something I really want to do.
For him to be a son of such a great person, to me, that in itself was an inspiration. The other most inspiring thing about his art and his style was his use of color and his looseness in portraying an image, but still being able to have an impact.
When I was in high school, the last couple of years, I started to take it more seriously. I had a great art teacher, Mr. Lopes, and he wasn't heavy-handed in his approach, even when I was kind of going in the wrong direction art-wise. But he encouraged me, showed me things, and let me figure things out.
Besides that, I never went to art school formally, no. It's all really self-taught.
And that's what worked best for me. Some people work better with formal instruction. Others more comfortable figuring things out on their own. But I would never say that I was a self-taught artist. I think self-guided would be a better word.
I had my classmates, kind of ask like, hey, can you draw me? So, I did this one girl and she was like, no, that's not me. And I was like, well, So I stood away from that for a long time because, after that I did, I focused more into, as I say, like expressing my creativity.
By the end of my time at school, I did a double major, fine art and engineering.
I eventually went to school in England. I got to do visual communication, video, photography, and stuff like that. And immediately after returning to Saint Lucia, I went to Jamaica to study commercial arts. And that's where I thought I'd be comfortable. And I thought I would be doing something that would help me professionally, more than just painting, because I would see the struggle my dad was going through with the painting.
I did end up majoring in art in college, university. But to be honest, I think most North American universities since the second half of the 20th century, the instruction has been more about self-expression rather than formal traditional technique. And I think that's deprived a lot of students of good instruction of how to become a better artist.
In Jamaica, I did 3 years studying commercial art, and I thought this would be the direction that I would go. My brother, Luigi, at the time, was doing fine art, and I thought that was acceptable. I thought that, well, Luigi, you and I, we can do different things to help the family. I would do commercial art and make the money. But on return to Saint Lucia, things didn't quite work out. I opened an advertising agency which ran for a few years. We made some money, but I realized that the business just wasn't there. And eventually went back to work, ended up at Simpex as the creative director.
A couple years after college, I managed to get a job at Children's Television Workshop in New York, Sesame Street, and that was a dream come true. Because there I was drawing and animating the Muppets that I grew up with, Bert and Ernie, the Count, Cookie Monster, and I was getting paid for it. And so that was a dream come true. And I did that for 5 years. I loved it. I enjoyed living in New York. But after 5 years, I kind of felt the need to spread my wings a little bit. So I applied to the Peace Corps. And I got a letter saying, you have been invited to serve in Saint Lucia.
People would still ask, oh, when I would need a painting of a picture of a house, a picture of something, a little landscape. So I always painted after work. So I'd come from work and paint at night, which is what my father was doing.
I'd heard of Saint Lucia. I knew where it was. I didn't know much about it, but I was excited. I was to teach woodworking at Laborie Boys Primary and then at Bonslaguas. And so that would be my job for 2 years.
My dad thought that it would be hard for a young man in our environment to survive, although he and Derek were doing it and they're friends. But he thought it was hard, especially my mom. It was forbidden. She said she actually used to say, not another artist in the house.
And my mom she loved the arts. And so my whole life she was always interested in what I was doing, whatever supplies I needed. And she'd always want to see the latest thing I was working on. So that kind of support helped so much.
My father is a carpenter. My mother is very creative. She does knitting, crocheting, all this kind of stuff. And but who really encouraged me was my aunts and uncles on my father's side. I remember Uncle Vern bought me my first painting set. I mean, I didn't know what to do, just follow the instructions and you painted and made mess.
Well, my father wanted me to be a doctor just like every parent, you know.
Well, because this lady right there would not encourage you to do an art degree. That's my grandmother, Naja Simeon. She was a big influence in my life. But she always wanted you to do something that is of service to people.
They didn't see anything else. They didn't see another career. Even when I said I loved engineering or science, because ultimately that's what I ended up studying, engineering, electrical.
So even if when I was drawing or teaching art, she'd be like, what are you going to do with that? Are you a teacher? I'm like, yeah, I'm a teacher, but I'm an art teacher. She's like, but what is that? What does an art teacher do? So she wanted you to be a policeman, a fireman, a doctor, a teacher, something of service, because she was a teacher herself in her younger days. So when we got the scholarship, I went to do engineering, but the art was like, you couldn't get away from it. Art was a calling.
My dad actually, he used to paint, he used to dabble in the arts. Although he was a brilliant technically, he was a genius. If electronics, mechanical stuff, he was a whiz. But I remember as a small child, he actually had some oil paints and he would sketch and do a few things, dabble here and there. And he was technically quite good. He used to draw his own circuit because of the electronics, right? Do representations of the circuitry.
I didn't even know they had like this art profession, or I could have made like an art career. I mean, I've been conditioned from infant school, you know, when the teacher would ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? A lot of the time people expect that I would be an art teacher. It's not until when I left school, and mind you, I have been doing a lot of things. Like through school, I went on to win some awards. I did well through, you know, my art.
So they never discouraged. I wouldn't say that they actively pushed me and said, you need to do art as a career. No, because, you know, in Saint Lucia, art wouldn't be paying the bills. Certainly not. And that's why Alwyn's mother said, not another artist probably. But Yeah, and going to a career of arts in Saint Lucia would have been sort of confining. You'd had to make a career out of it, be a teacher, instructor, and so on. I mean, you could, of course, make a living, but even back then, it wasn't necessarily something you'd go into as a first choice necessarily.
Sometimes you don't have people in your corner to help you. I mean, I could say straight that, I don't have family support, I don't, you kind of always find your little haters and whatnot, but that always makes life interesting to me. I keep my head down, I work hard, always try something outside of the box.
Going into another career where I could use the art as an augment was interesting. I mean, my parents were always supportive, I'd say, yeah, but it wasn't something that they were saying, okay, you need to do that. No, it was at my own pace.
What has influenced me a lot as a painter was growing up in Central Castries, the rich culture, especially at Christmas time. The masquerade tradition. It was like an open theater at Christmas. Go by the market and see tours practicing before Christmas and see the different masquerades, the Paibanan, the tours.
I'm always evolving from doing very graphic stuff, doing very detailed stuff, to doing pop art, to doing very controversial art, to doing colorful art. But one thing that always stuck to me at university is the artist's role, or the role of the artist, is to tell the truth.
I went to the inner gallery. It was like more of a black silhouette on a colored background, kind of painting in the negatives. It was just me exploring and having fun. I took to the human form, no faces, no hair, no, just like the human form down to the, down to just the image of the, of a person, but not really the details of the person.
Because I was gravitated towards realistic portrayals, I was also doing that, But like I said, the interest in wildlife art, I guess, came about because at home my parents, brought in, books and reading material on wildlife and all that. So that inspired me from the early days, I guess. I remember we had a book on Canadian wildlife, and these were paintings by a well-known Canadian artist, and I used to try to copy those. And that was even like in the the early 1980s. I had done a few of these drawings to try to mimic this artist.
You major in art, you take art history classes, you learn about this style, that style, impressionism, cubism, realism. And okay, what style do I paint in?
I'll say this, my preferred medium, my preferred tool is airbrushing. My preferred medium is acrylic satin emulsion paint.
You have to tell a story, you have to say something, you have a powerful tool. So I don't have a style to say I'm only doing animation or I'm only doing pencil and charcoal. I'm always ready to explore and try new things.
Eventually I decided, okay, these things that I'm painting, these things, the people in the library, the way of life here, the landscapes, the houses, everything, the culture, there's nothing I could add to it that would improve upon what I'm seeing like that. So the best thing I can do is try to paint things as they are, as much as I possibly could.
My preferred style is colorism, realism, and a little surrealism when the project demands that.
The original traditional way that I started painting was all on canvas. That's how you're taught. So that's what I think I am most competent in and best when I'm doing like this, because it is like to the T. It's like you're going back into a program that was installed in your head. So it is down to the detail. I like to work like that. But I also like to do murals where I'm working with acrylics, I'm working with rollers, spray paint, paint brushes.
I work in oils. I started with acrylics. About the first 5 years I was painting in acrylics, which were great. They're convenient, you just need water for cleanup and mixing.
I kind of had to make sure my stuff could get wet and dry without no issue. So acrylic on canvas did it for me.
The oil, it takes a long time to dry. but the pigments are richer. It is full, it is bold, it's very expressive. You can do a lot with it. Acrylics, I find it dries fast, but you have to apply a lot of coats of the paint to get the richness you want. So I did not work with acrylics for almost 10 years after I left art school. Like, I was just not interested in acrylics. But when I returned to Saint Lucia, I had to evolve because I couldn't get oil paints the way I wanted to. Like, you know, the price of buying a tube of oil paint was ridiculous.
Airbrushing, spray painting, you could call it whatever you want depending on the tool you're using for spraying. Airbrushing, there's no need to ever touch the surface. So there are many restrictions when you have to physically touch the surface with your tool. So there's wastage, there's drying time, there's the limit of where you can touch. With the airbrush, I can reach places I cannot even touch.
I like to paint using the palette knife technique. I discovered it late, but I always remember my dad always thought that I was too detailed. My work was too detailed. So very early on, he told me, Alwyn, you're a Dutch master. And you know, they'll have 1,000 Dutch masters around the world. There are fellows doing photo art, and you have to develop your own style, your own thing. And he said, Alwyn, you must be able to capture what you want to do in a one brush stroke.
I would love to do the oils, but oils take so long to dry, and it's, you know, but everything in its time, I guess. You know, maybe it will come to a point that I wouldn't be battling the elements. So I could probably sit down and give some pencil work, some watercolor.
An airbrush gives you, airbrush or a sprayer naturally gives you a gradient because the paint particles are atomized. So you have much more control, and the aesthetics of it is much more of what you want to achieve, what you try to achieve with a hand brush but will never be able to.
Even though I was doing the kind of different types of art forms and expressions at St. Mary's, as when I went to A-level, I think even more became more turned on to that. And I did biology, for example, as a core subject, just out of interest in the natural environments. I used to be watching nature documentaries on TV and so on. So those kinds of things really inspired me, and it worked into my art from those days.
The palette knife allows you to be more expressive. You can use a knife and in an instant you get the effect you want.
I mean, I meet favorite painters on Instagram like this because there's so many artists. Traditionally, in my studies, Leonardo da Vinci, Rembrandt, Monet.
Well, John Singer Sargent, I think for realist painters, I think he's everyone's favorite or one of their favorites. And then there's another late 19th century artist, French artist, Bouguereau.
My old man for sure. His work obviously influenced his style, although he was a post-impressionist. He followed the style of Van Gogh. He liked Van Gogh's brushstrokes. That's the same style, you know. And Luigi has even gone even more mad than both of us. He's just, what he does is post-impressionist on steroids. My
favorites are those who are closest to me, my local brethren. I would say Tyrone Steele, Alwyn St. Alwyn St was actually the first person I ever saw airbrushing. I didn't know what he was doing. I was just in awe. I stopped the bus I was on. At that time I was pretty young. And I just stood there for the entire day. I just watched him. He didn't even know I was watching him.
Shepard Fairey is a mural artist. Jean-Michel Basquiat is a Haitian, Puerto Rican, American artist. He's a true Caribbean artist, but people know about Basquiat for his American work. And recently, I'm looking at a lot of the pop artists who are out there who just just go out on the streets and paint.
I guess because of the fact that before I started to paint wildlife back in the early 1980s, I was really hard pressed to figure out which local artists were actually depicting wildlife themes on a regular basis or environmental themes.
So went from traditional, really, really detailed work And again, Da Vinci was an engineer, an architect, a scientist, and an artist. So I read so many of the codices and studied them. I redrew his work like I did in my notebooks. Like, I made my own notebooks of Da Vinci's influence.
Dunstan St. Omer had some, his work sort of, he had a range of stuff. Some of his work also portrayed some of the scenes on Saint Lucia. And I found those quite fascinating. And that kind of thing gravitated my interest.
Sargent, he was just such a master at painting portraits and faces with an economy of brush strokes. I mean, seemed like he could just get a nose and an eye and things with just a few strokes, and everything was perfect.
Harry Simmons did a few of those sorts of landscapes. But for the most part, a lot of the art that's coming out of in those days I was seeing anyways portraiture.
Bouguereau, on the other hand, it's just such wonderfully crafted paintings of children and women were so detailed.
There's a guy called Jim Warren. He's an American airbrush artist. So Jim Warren is a surrealist painter. His style is what I aspire to be like. That's the style I would love to be able to pull off. His blend of surrealism and realism to convey a message is so on point. It is exactly what you want to accomplish with art. Like, he wows you, he makes you think, and he makes you wonder, how did he think of that? So the most impressive you could be creatively is when people cannot predict what you're going to do.
Rembrandt, because of the portraits. So I studied him because I like the way he painted portraits and how he studied light. I like Da Vinci because of the architecture, engineering, and art combination to show that you can do anything.
The other Caribbean artists that I admired and look at, but there's the simplicity of the madness of Gauguin's work, his use of color, and I think a lot of our work shows that understanding and use of color.
My favorite Caribbean artist, I would say, is Bosco Holder from Trinidad. And I mean, he was just, again, someone else who painted people in a really magical way and used design and color so well.
Locally also Jonathan Gladden, because he I think he's the artist that paints the images I always want to paint. He creates that feel of what Saint Lucia used to look like, that nostalgic. He gives you that nostalgic feeling. That's his gift.
Basquiat, because he was a black man from the Caribbean, and a lot of Caribbean people don't really know about him. But when my professor told me about him, I really liked his story, his struggles, and his just raw expression, because he did his stuff very, very abstract, because he was just telling a story. He was not trying to be proficient. He was just telling his story.
One artist that really, I was really so impressed with and taken up with was Robert Bateman. He's a Canadian artist.
Shepard Fairey, because he was doing the murals and stickers and t-shirts and stuff like that. So I kind of leaned towards him while I was at university to see how an artist can make it out into the world, but also speak about the things that are happening in the world. He's talking about war, he's talking about politics, he's talking about all these things. He did the whole poster with Obama.
I appreciate art. Like, anytime I look at a piece of art, either it moves me or not. I don't know, I don't have a favorite artist per se, or I have one type of art per se. Like, some of the weirdest stuff you will be like, yeah, because it's a vibe, it's an energy. So they don't have nothing like perfect art or the right way to do it